Hi all, this is Robin. I'm here joining you from New Orleans. Welcome to the Buddhist Recovery Network Academy. Today we have a teaching by Kevin Griffin. He's going to offer us some reflections on recovery. Thank you for joining us. As always, thank you for taking part in our community and for joining our Sangha and helping to grow it in these really collaborative ways. It's wonderful to see you all. We have a format that usually goes like this. We begin with a guided meditation and followed by a Dharma talk, and then we'll open it up for questions or comments after the talk is over. I just like to share with you that the Buddhist Recovery Network operates on a volunteer basis, and our teachers are offering their wisdom on a volunteer basis. And so we will have an opportunity to give dana, and I will put the link in now, but I'll also put it in towards the end of the talk. And we don't have a donate now button, so you do have to go to our website. And if you indicate that it's for the academy, then we can steer that money towards growing this program. I'll tell you a little bit about Kevin in case you don't know him. Kevin is a Buddhist teacher and author in the Theravada tradition. He's also co-founder of the Buddhist Recovery Network, and he teaches internationally across Buddhist traditions. He's been a practitioner and in recovery for over 3 decades. I think it's 35 years now. And his teacher training was at Spirit Rock Meditation Center in Northern California, where he still teaches his flagship Dharma and Recovery class. Besides teaching at Buddhist and other spiritual centers, Kevin works with treatment centers and has consulted with leading addiction researchers. And we really appreciate you being here with us on this holiday weekend, Kevin. It's really good to have you back. And
Thanks,
yes, I'm going to turn it over to you now. And if you prefer that we turn our videos off as well, let me know. I'm going to turn this on to speaker view.
I like seeing people.
All right, great.
Yeah, nice to see everybody and see a lot of friends out there, or in there, or over there, or whatever the there is. I am not in my usual Zoom space. For those who have been following me since March 13th, when I started teaching online, I'm teaching every Tuesday morning, at least in Pacific time, 10 a.m. and Friday night, 7 p.m. The links are on my website, kevingriffin.net. But I am on vacation, sort of, whatever that means in the time of coronavirus. I'm in Boise, Idaho, so visiting with some relatives. The air conditioning broke in our room, so we have a fan on. So if the fan is annoying, I would say let me know, but I think I'm not going to turn it off anyway. So I hope that it's not annoying, that you can be just, work with your annoyance. Yeah, we'll sit in a minute, I guess. It's just been such a strange time for all of us, and every time I kind of get on a call and see everybody, just sort of like, it reminds me how not normal things are. I think you probably can all relate that you can kind of go through part of your day and everything sort of seem normal, and then something happens where you have to go outside, you put in a mask or go shopping or something, and all of a sudden you're like, this is not normal. So doing all my teaching online is not normal. Although this is something Buddhist Recovery Network's been doing for a while, so we were prepared for this, right? It's good. So yeah, let's sit. I'll give some instruction, and I'll work with just a simple approach to mindfulness. So beginning by either closing your eyes or lowering your gaze. And just generally being aware of your body, how you're holding your body, your posture, and trying to sit in a way that you can be alert and still relaxed. So that usually means working with the spine, having a relatively straight spine without being rigid. And coming into stillness. You can do a brief body scan, just taking the attention through the body, noticing any points of tension or tightness. See if you can soften, but also just tuning in to the different sensations in the body. Though we talk about the body as a single thing, but in fact it's of course got many different elements, different components, and we'll have a whole variety of sensations at any time. And tuning into the life of the body, such a helpful way to come into the present moment, reminding us that our existence is not all in thought or in the mind. Letting your awareness be open to sounds as well as the body. Whatever your environment is. And then bringing awareness to the breath. As we work with mindfulness of breath, we want to really tune into the sensations of breath. Noticing just one breath, how it feels to breathe in and breathe out. Where is it easy for you to feel the breath? The nostrils, where the air comes in and out, that touch sensation, or perhaps the belly or chest, the rising and falling sensation, the movement. So as you tune into the breath, there's a settling that can happen in the body and in the mind. Just a calming, a sense of ease, not striving for anything, not trying to figure anything out. Just letting yourself be here. Of course, this simple task, mindfulness of the breath, turns out is not so easy. The mind is habituated, is trained to be busy, to be thinking. And so even when we make an effort to just be present with the breath, the mind wanders. So our task is often to keep bringing it back. But to do that in a way that doesn't create more agitation. So we try to bring an attitude of kindness, of gentleness to this practice of coming back. The mind insists that thinking is the most important thing. Some kind of urgency. And yet, as we observe what's coming up, observe the thoughts, we see how so much of it is just repetition, busy work, thinking about things that could easily be left aside. And notice too if there are some mood or emotion that's intruding on your experience, or that's in the background even. Often some kind of emotion will be triggering the thoughts. And so to go deeper, we have to turn toward the feelings. Allow them to have space to be felt. And here we might rebel. In fact, the thoughts are sometimes an effort to escape the feelings, to paper over the feelings, to think the feelings away. Again, the breath becomes our tool for this practice. We can breathe into the feelings. Open the chest, open the belly, to give space for feelings to move through, for those energies to just dissipate. We can strengthen our focus by looking at the breath in more detail, becoming intimate with those sensations. The whole of the in-breath, the whole of the out-breath. Any spaces in between. May all beings be free from the suffering of addiction. May all beings find freedom and peace. Okay, thank you. I don't have a bell with me, so. Yeah, so I thought I gave Robin a very sort of generic title for this talk, and as partly because I thought I would use it as a time to kind of reflect on stages of recovery, and hopefully bring that in connecting with Dharma, with Buddhism. I've just recently passed a sort of milestone in my own recovery, 35 years, and that's half my life. I yeah got sober when I was 35, so it's interesting to kind of reflect on the kind of different stages and the challenges, and you know that, and just first of all just to acknowledge that I'm in a stage of recovery now. It's not like I'm done with the work, and I think one of the things that I've always kind of valued about recovery programs, and I got sober in AA, was this idea that I'm not trying to get to some place, but that I'm always in process. And when I got my first sponsor, he had just been through like a really difficult year, and he was 10 years sober. And some people might think, oh, you don't want to get somebody who's having problems, but for me that was reassuring, because I didn't really feel comfortable with the people who were always sort of happy, everything is great, all I have to do is not drink and then I'm happy, and all my problems are solved. So just to kind of go back, as I was reflecting on these kind of ways of thinking about the different kind of challenges of recovery, kind of like the first challenge is the challenge of craving, and we live with this craving as addicts, and our response to it is just to act on the craving. And so our first challenge in recovery really is to be able to cease to act on craving. And of course, craving is at the heart of what the Buddha taught as the problems, as the more general problem in life, that's at the root of suffering. So that teaching to understand craving and how it arises and how it is sustained is so important in recovery, to see that it's impermanent, but that it's reinforced every time we act on it. Because this is the sort of delusion of addiction, that if I take my drug of choice or take this action or whatever my behavior is, that then I'll be satisfied. But the Buddhist teaching on karma teaches us that whatever we do repetitively, that becomes stronger rather than weaker. And it's to me, that's maybe the most brilliant insight of Buddhism, because it's so counterintuitive to how people live. The constant cycle, whether they're addicts or not, the cycle of craving and the cycle of trying to satisfy and avoid pain and get pleasure, and not realizing that all of that striving just creates more striving. So that can seem like, in early recovery, that can seem like, okay, if I can just solve this, then I'll have it together, right? And, and for many of us, and not everyone does overcome craving. I have a dear friend who's a year longer, has been sober a year longer than I, And she still struggles with craving, but she's just committed to the program and to working with it and living with it. But for many of us, and I was fortunate enough that the craving passed fairly quickly. So then there's this next, this whole thing that opens up when we let go of that, which is, I mean, there's different ways to talk about it and characterize it, but in some way it's this big question of who am I and what is my life about now? So as an addict, it allows us to have this kind of simple life, just like I just need to take care of my addiction and I'm good, but all of a sudden it's like, oh, now I'm going to try to do more with my life. And we step into these big challenges of questioning, and so immediately we're faced with who am I going to be with? Who are going to be my friends? Who am I going to be in relationship with? As addicts, of course, we tended to hang out with other addicts. So now we realize that doesn't really work. Well, who do I want to be with? And I always thought people who didn't drink and use were kind of boring, So I didn't really want to hang out with people who didn't drink and use. But fortunately, it turned out that the other people who stopped drinking and using weren't so boring. So of course, going to meetings, being in a recovery program. But this is, the Buddhist view on this, of course, is that Sangha is necessary, community is necessary to sustain a spiritual path. So we, connect with this very difficult, to practice meditation alone, as a just ongoing practice. We need Sangha. Very difficult to stay in recovery alone. And of course, that, a whole other bunch of problems come up with that, because many of us were not the most healthy social individuals. So now we're trying to have healthy, happy relationships that aren't about exploiting other people. What can I get from you? But are about finding something meaningful together, sharing a path together. So that's one element of this kind of, what I would say is like the next step in recovery after kind of dealing with craving is community, relationship, and that can go on, be, something that continues through your recovery. And then there's the whole, what am I doing with my life in other ways? Whether, many people have financial problems or professional problems. And so, all of this practical stuff, early in recovery, it can seem like we've just got this full-time job of sort of straightening out our life. And in the 12-step world, that kind of is where we step into the inventory and amends and kind of trying to clean up all that part. But it's also that challenge, again, of who am I and what do I want to do with this life. The Buddhist path presents us with these guidelines. The Eightfold Path, first of all, presents us with these ethical guidelines, the right action, and then right livelihood, so that we start thinking again about, not about, oh, what can I get from me, but what can I contribute to the world? And the 12 steps, of course, in the 12th step are talking about that, about being of service. And this is, again, such a change from being an addict to that self-centeredness to just a complete flip. And so we step into this. This is really moving into a whole new life in a way. Well, it's not in a way. It is a whole new life. I feel like, and again, I can't speak for every person in recovery, and everybody has their own path. But I think there are sort of these elements of this path that are fairly common, so that there's this kind of way in which early recovery can be about sort of taking on a lot of tasks. And I know at a certain point, I was just like, working a job, had a band, going to school. It was like, I was just really trying to, in a way, trying to make up for all lost time, and I think that can turn into, workaholism, or that can turn into another kind of fixing ourselves. So, part of this process is realizing I've got to keep track. I've got to stay in touch with where am I right now? What is it that I'm really trying to accomplish right now? So there's all that practical stuff happening. But then there's this underlying spiritual challenge. And the 12 steps, of course, make this very explicit with the higher power that many people struggle with. But certainly any Buddhist path also really is very demanding in this way. You know, the idea of taking refuge in the Buddha, taking refuge in the Dharma, taking refuge in the Sangha, it's a tremendous commitment, and and a kind of devotion we have to bring to our spiritual life. And then as we turn, this means we're really starting to turn inward, and we're going beyond the externals of, okay, I'm dealing with my addiction, I'm trying to deal with my work life, my relationship life. Now we're turning inward, and so many of us, first of all, just have, unresolved trauma, depression, anxiety, bipolar, name it, right? And somebody says, oh, you should meditate because that'll make it better. Well, maybe, sometimes we sit down to meditate and it's like, wow, this is what's going on. What am I supposed to do with this? Like, hold on. Um, so, so I think that, one of the crises that can happen in, now I think I'm putting this just generally in the kind of 5 to 10 year period, is this spiritual crisis where we come to, may have these ideas of, oh, I'm going to be spiritual now, and I'm a yoga teacher, and I'm going to, do this, all this good stuff. And then we discover that, wow, it's more complicated than that. Again, with the 12 steps, many people run into this, people who are able to like work with higher power, at a certain point go like, I can't do this anymore. My higher power left. Whenever people say like, I lost touch with my higher power, I'm like, well, then there was something that was not right about that higher power, because I don't think you can really lose touch with higher power, but that's another topic. So now we're, have to, as I say, many of us come through this kind of spiritual crisis, and how do we resolve that? I have a good friend who's been sober a good period of time, over a decade, maybe 15 years, and he's come on retreats with me, and he hates meditating. You know, he just hates he stopped. He's like, he doesn't meditate anymore. I'm like, okay, that's fine. If that doesn't work, then that doesn't work. It's not a cure-all. Because I can get into that kind of, well, you just meditate more, and sometimes that's not the cure. But it's also true that many people find that to really go deep into their spiritual practice, they need to start doing retreat, and if you are getting into meditation, and if it is something that works for you, that, all right, you go on a meditation retreat, go on a couple of those, and this can take you into a whole other world. I've seen quite a number of people start going on retreats and realize that they really want to go deep, and those often the people who want to wind up becoming teachers, or just sort of spontaneously do become teachers because they've gone really deep into their practice. My own sort of process around recovery and particularly the 12 steps and Buddhism is pretty well documented in a couple of my books. But just to sort of briefly say, the crisis I went through was this need to reconcile my 12-step program with with my Buddhist practice, because initially I just kept them apart, and I didn't want them to touch each other, because I was afraid that because I had practiced Buddhism before I got sober, I was afraid that if I depended too much on Buddhism, or sort of let the 12-step thing slip, that I would relapse. Um, and initially I couldn't really reconcile them, and so that was about 7 years sober when I started to work at reconciling them, and that was a, decade-long process, really. So, after 10 years, again, like a lot of different things can happen, can open up, and I have to really just recognize that and acknowledge that I've seen people relapse at every every period of time, for at least up to 20 years. Um, so far, I haven't seen anybody with 35 years relapse. So, you know, knock on wood at somewhere. Anyway, um, but each of these challenges can be something that throws us off the path, and so again, I think it's so important to acknowledge where you are. There's a tendency, if any of you, I know some of you have kids, because I know some of you. So when you're raising kids, one of the things I noticed when I was raising my daughter, when my wife and I were raising my daughter, which is even a weird term, it's like we were raising wheat or something. Anyway, that, as we were parenting her, we were always one step behind. Every time she would change, and we'd be like, "Oh, all right, no, wait, how do we get her to bed now? How do we, what is she eating now? What does she like to do now?" And once you just about when you figured it out was when she changed again and went into another mode. She's like, "No, I don't like that anymore." And you're like, "What? I thought that was the thing you." So, the same can happen with recovery. I don't know if that's a ridiculous analogy, but maybe, we are taking care of our inner child, but that we kind of, as we go along, we're like, well, what do I need to do to take care of myself right now? Where am I at right now? And we might be trying to use yesterday's solution, right? And sort of not recognize that I'm not in the same space I was 5 years ago, or even where I was 6 months ago. I have to really be respectful of that. So, I think, when you get into 15 and 20 years, here's where I think the real danger is just drifting away from recovery and not really staying in touch with the fact that you're still an addict. And there's definitely, and a lot of people rebel with that idea. Uh, and I understand that. And, uh, if you don't need that reflection, and it works for you to just say, like, I'm not an addict anymore, or I don't need to be involved. There's people who have been fine. I know people who've stopped any active engagement in a recovery program and stayed sober, and their lives are still positive. I also know people who have not, right? Who have kind of become complacent. For me, it's not really about, even though I certainly acknowledge, I mean, I will say, I'm Kevin, I'm an alcoholic. It's not about that, about whether I'm going to drink or not, although it's clearly I could. But rather, it's about this engagement, this spiritual engagement, this being on a path. And it happens that my spiritual path is is intertwined with recovery. I mean, it's such an interesting thing, that and again, so I've seen so many people, I know so many people who relate in this way, that it was the acknowledgement of our failure, or our acknowledgement of our being an addict, that put us strongly on a spiritual path and gave us a real kind of direction and motivation on that path. And so, I know traditionally in AA, it's about sponsoring people, or, being secretary in meetings and sort of doing service in AA. I see it in broader terms, but um, just in more general terms of maintaining a spiritual practice. And yeah, the the beauty though of step 12 and the 12 steps is that it points to service as the really ultimate stage, I'll say, of recovery. And this is, very similar to the Buddhist path. And I think it's really interesting to think of it in terms of the Buddhist teaching on self and not self. That if we have insight into the insubstantiality of self, then what we immediately know is that, well, I can't solve the problems of self because there's nothing really to not going to say there's nothing to solve, but there's nothing to work on exactly. Let me put it in another way. That in a more simply, that if we see that there's no self, then spending our time trying to fix or take care of that self is a fool's errand. And what with a natural outgrowth of that, the compassionate outgrowth of that, because that's the wisdom, right? That's the wisdom insight. The compassionate outgrowth, the other wing of Buddhism, is that, oh, I'm going to try to help other people to have that insight. I'm going to do that service. So that's what, that's the story of the Buddha in his awakening, that he has this breakthrough, realizes that he's solved his own problem. And as the story is told in the suttas, he then thinks, well, nobody's going to really understand this. But as in the suttas, it says a God comes and tells him, no, there are some people who will understand it. There are some with a little dust in their eyes. However, we understand that if we think of it more as in psychological terms, that he has this insight that, oh, no, there are people who can be helped. And what did he do? The Buddha becomes enlightened at 35. For 45 years, he just walks around India helping people. And that was all he did, nothing else to do, because he had solved his own problem. This is for us, of course, it's a solution for us because we recognize how our self-obsession is so destructive for us. So whether we're 1 day sober or 35 years sober or 45 years sober, self-obsession is always going to be a danger. And turning away from that, finding another way to focus in a positive way, to be of service, to help others in simple ways, in any way, is going to be the answer for us. And again, it's just one of the beautiful spiritual paradoxes, that the way we solve our own problem is by helping others, not by trying to focus on our own, fix ourselves. So I hope that's of some help. Those words are of some value, and I'd love to see if anyone has any comments or questions or thoughts they want to toss in here the last few minutes.
I have a question that's been burning inside me for a while, but so, and it's kind of, you know, it could go on, but I just, and this seems like this will be a conversation ongoing, but at what point, or what was the most challenging, giving up or letting go, or I don't know how you would say it, giving up, letting go of a Catholic God,
Mm.
and then transforming it into a Dharma God? What was the most challenging or difficult? If you can even, I mean, you
Yeah.
know,
Well, that's
just some
funny.
thoughts. Yeah.
I mean, I think I had given that up, and then I got it back, you know, in a way. Uh, I, what was challenging for me, what was really challenging was to try to make it fit with the 12 steps, because I was trying to work the 12 steps, and and prayers uh, and the steps around God started to like kind of bang up against what was, for me it was like kind of dissolving, you know, in a sense, like the, you know, the my sense of spiritual, my sense of higher power was kind of uh, becoming just more spacious and amorphous, and um, it didn't
Before you
really.
got into AA, was that
No,
happening?
no,
No.
no. After I worked the program for a
Oh,
while, because
okay,
as I
good. Yeah.
said, it's kind of because I was trying to work the program like just do it like it is, right, in the
Yeah.
book, and do these and you know, kind of uh, use kind of my devotional side to do that, because I had done some devotional work around kind of Hinduish stuff, you know, and so I could kind of connect through like a devotional feeling, like, okay, I'll say the Our Father, and I'll just think of it as like opening and having this love. But just the language itself, and the concept, and really the concept of this external God that was going to like be involved in some way, just clashed after a while with my sense. And it really happened, you know, as I describe it, on this one retreat where I was just sitting and trying to do prayers, and I was open and focused and spacious, and it was like trying to like, God seemed like a very dense concept, where
Right.
my mind seemed very spacious.
Right.
And so there wasn't a problem there, because it was very you know, I felt very comfortable in that spaciousness. But it was hard to reconcile it with what I'd been doing in terms of step work.
Mm-hmm. Spacious. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if that answers the question, but it's,
That's a great start.
thanks.
Yeah. Thank you. No, that helps a lot. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for your question.
Yeah.
Anil, would you like to come on?
Thank you so much. Thank you, Kevin, for your talk.
Yeah.
My name is Anil. I'm living in London. I was kind of eager to come and listen to you today, and just a quick backdrop. I've been involved in meditation and spiritual work for 25 years, as well as psychological work, and earlier this year, I had a real rock bottom experience in my life where just everything collapsed, and um, and a lot of denial that I had been living in for decades sort of surfaced, and um, you know, it turns out that I'm a sex addict. I've got gambling addiction issues. I mean, the list of addictions just go on.
Mm.
And I've got really, very deep post-traumatic stress disorder.
Mm-hmm.
And I came into recovery. I came into the 12 steps, and I felt really angry. I felt I'd been doing all this fucking work in spirituality
Mm-hmm.
with real masters. I mean, these, you know, I'm talking like people like Adyashanti,
Mm-hmm.
you know, these are the written. I'm not talking about, you know, the fakers out there. These are the real awakened people.
Yeah.
And 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 personally, I was having really amazing experiences of my eye dissolving,
Mm-hmm.
the vastness, all of that stuff. It didn't touch my addiction.
Right.
It didn't touch it. And so here I am, a 55-year-old man. My life's completely collapsed on step one of recovery work.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a breath of fresh air.
Yes.
And what I've realized, Kevin, if for me, is that the whole, and maybe it was the way I approached it, but for me, that whole spirituality was an avoidance of my pain,
Mm-hmm.
was an avoidance of the deep trauma. I thought I could get out of it by going through this, into this spiritual, whatever it is that I was looking for. And
Yeah.
actually, the truth is this: freedom is not avoidance of pain, but for now, as I realize, is living in and through the pain.
Yep.
And that really is my genuine experience. And
Yeah.
in the few months that I've been in recovery, I can honestly tell you, I've experienced more connectedness with myself,
Mm.
others, and divinity than I experienced in 25 years of living in ashrams and going on retreats
Yep.
and pretending to be, you know, whatever I was pretending to be.
Yep.
And there's a part of me that, and I want to be genuine about this, Kevin. There's a part of me that hurts when I hear you say this, that we can avoid the self.
Mm. Right. Right.
And maybe I'm misunderstanding what
Oh
you're
no.
saying.
Yeah. No, no, no. That's Anil. That's a really important point. That there there's the reality of that. In ultimate reality is that self is a construction, and there's the lived reality that we are in a body, we are in a mind, we have emotions that have to be dealt with, and if those aren't healed, if those aren't taken care of, they're the foundation. That has to be there before you can have any kind of meaningful transcendent experience. This is, and what you're talking about is very familiar to me because it's very similar to my own path. Not quite as long that I was, in what, in that spiritual bypass, but I was very much used Buddhism and meditation as a way to fix, solve, avoid my pain. And it was only when I got sober that I realized, oh, that wasn't really going to get me anywhere until I had a foundation. So it's really the Buddhist path, sila, samadhi, panya, right? Sila is the starting point, and in the West we sort of skip over it. Sila is the morality, the ethics, and it's much more than that. To me, it's also our psychological, well-being that has our personal psychology that needs to be addressed. The trauma, the depression, the anxiety that has to be addressed before we can. There's no foundation for spiritual
Right.
growth without that. So we have to, the famous phrase, can't remember who came up with it, but is we have to have a self before we can let go of self. So we have to have a healthy, integrated self that then before we can sort of see it. And I'm not like in the Adyashanti school. I mean, I've seen him and he's very impressive, but it's a little bit like up here, and it doesn't really solve it for me. There are people who can go there, and people who don't have the kinds of history that people in recovery typically have. People who can just go and kind of transcend, and it's all good. You know, I go there, and I lose my mortgage. You know what I mean? Like I stop showing up, and
Right.
I decide I really don't care about my wife after all. Like it just. So I've got to live I've got to have that foundation, and I have to maintain it. That's one of the reasons why I keep saying I'm an alcoholic, even though I'm 35 years sober, because that sila foundation, that, as you're saying, that healthy self, I can lose that if I get too lofty in my ideas about who I am. No, the idea that the way I see the not self is just more in terms of not being self-centered, and not letting my selfishness drive everything. So that's, but absolutely, I have to take care of that little, what for me is that kind of little boy in me that needs care, or I'm in deep shit, if you'll pardon the expression.
Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah, it's nice to meet you, Neil. Yeah.
Just one little thing is now I look at spirituality through the eyes of recovery. And I honestly, and I don't know if it's being judgmental, but I look at so many people involved in those circles. They are fucking addicts, man. I'm telling you, to their core. And it's just, and I love them. And that's where I was.
Yeah.
And it's just, you're right. The two things have to go hand in hand. And that's kind of what I've learned.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Sure, you have a lot of agreement on this call.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do we have time for one more?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Sure.
John from UK, would you like to come on?
Oh, hello. Thank you. I didn't think I'd get a chance. But yeah, very nice to see you, Kevin. You came to the UK a couple of times a few years back, and I was there both times, and I was very new to recovery, maybe 7 years ago, something like that. So it's so nice to see you again.
Nice.
Congratulations on 35 years. So my question is sort of just thinking about the Eightfold Path and how do we apply that, because I'm sort of tugged one way, all the stuff with Black Lives Matters, LGBT rights, my family from Hong Kong. I'm like, oh my God. And then I'm in recovery myself. I've just joined this fellowship, Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Families, looking at all the trauma stuff, which is so deep. And then, like one of the other sharers, I have lots of other cross addictions. I think more have come up since I last see you. And then I guess the most important thing for me is right livelihood. So post-COVID, what I do is I'm having to move my business online. It's just, so it's so many things floating around, and 12 steps, 8-4 path, blah, blah, blah. So confusing. So, I mean, any sort of tips is, so firstly, did Buddha go through these turbulent times during all those years back? Is there anything that Buddha could say about Black Lives Matters, etc., etc.? And secondly, Eightfold Path and right livelihood in these difficult times. Welcome any reflections on that.
Yeah. Well, I told Robin when we were talking about this, that what's been really of most in my mind lately has not been the Eightfold Path, but has been Black Lives Matter. And, I've given a couple of talks around those issues, which I am by no means an expert on, and someone who I feel a great responsibility to educate myself and to do my best to act skillfully, and as the book I'm reading now is Learn to be an Anti-Racist. And of course, any kind of teaching about any kind of movement for liberation that's about equality, that's about love, that's about peace, is in perfect harmony with Buddhism. So there's no conflict there. I'm finding that, I'm taking a little bit of a branch, like I'm focusing on particular things like anti-racism right now, but the Eightfold Path contains it all. If you just look at the precepts, to not kill or harm others, to not steal, right? To not harm people sexually, to not lie or hurt them verbally, to not use intoxicants. I mean, right there, that kind of covers, you know, the social justice movements. You know. And so I hold the Eightfold Path as something that's, yeah, overarching, that you know, goes into every part of my life. In order to be skillful in any kind of behavior, whether it's about my livelihood or whether it's about my response to racial justice or racial injustice, I have to be mindful. That's always the starting point. Because if I'm not mindful, I get caught up in the anger. I get caught up in the frustration. And that, if I'm in that, I'm not in the peace. I'm not going to change anything. That's just perpetuating the same problems that are all built on greed, hatred, and delusion. So I have to maintain that balance with mindfulness, and that has to be informed with compassion and loving kindness. But I don't have to just sit here and meditate on those things. I can take that awareness, that mindfulness, that compassion into the world, and I have a responsibility to. You know, Bhikkhu Bodhi is one of the great Buddhist scholars and leaders, Westerners, wrote an essay called "A Challenge to Buddhists," which is I recommend to everyone for thinking about how we take our path into the world. And he is a Buddhist scholar, and he could have easily just stayed in Sri Lanka and translated sutras for his whole life, but he came back to the United States and works for social justice now. It was in Lion's Roar in 2007, A Challenge to Buddhists. You can Google it, and I find it very inspiring to see that coming from somebody who's a scholar and a monk, who's saying it's not enough to just sit and meditate. You know, you have to bring this into the world, and it's hard. You know, it's not easy. You know, this is not. Thank you. There we go. There's a link to the article. I'm finding it very difficult and painful educating myself about racism. I thought I knew. I thought I understood, and I would rather not learn about it because it's so painful. But you know, anyway, I'm not sure I'm answering your question there, John.
I mean, in Buddha's time, I remember there's a caste system, wasn't there?
Yes.
Do you think, I mean, Buddha's time, is it anything relevant from his
Oh, absolutely.
21st century?
The Buddha was completely opposed to the caste system, and he denied that it was valid. You know, he said that because a Brahmin was supposed to be the highest caste, he said, a Brahmin is not by birth. A Brahmin is, and then he would, you know, do his own little trick, which is a Brahmin is someone who lives in this way as following the Eightfold Path, basically. So he typically, as he would do, would redefine things and say that. So he ordained lower caste people. You know, the person who first recited the precepts had been like a barber, I believe, and what's like the lowest caste, but he was an enlightened being, and so, yeah, the Buddha was an anti-racist, we can safely say.
I guess another my question is just because of probably we're all struggling for money. Well, not all of us, many of us. How do we, you know, be skillful about right livelihoods to make money and then be able to be a social justice and these things? I guess that's another my question.
Well, I mean, right, and it kind of goes back to what Anil was talking about in terms of, you know, are we going to just try to be transcendent spiritual beings and then realize we don't have the rent? You know, this is, and you know, this is again the challenge of like, you know, we can't all be like gurus and therapists or whatever, people have to make a living. And to me, the essence of right livelihood is right intention. I mean, there are occupations that are unskillful, like, professional killer or something, drug dealer. I've done that. Probably many of us have done that. But most jobs, professions can be done with love and with the spirit of service. And that to me is the essence of it. Even if you're doing something that seems somewhat rote, you're a barista, or you're, I worked as a technical writer, and that was nothing spiritual about it, but I tried to do it with the sense that I'm doing this to help people. So I think it's the intention more than the action itself. Because we know there are people who are doctors, you think that's such a great right livelihood, but who can be very unskillful in the way they treat people. And they're not bringing right intention. They're not bringing love into their work. So I think we have to be responsible, first of all, right? We have to be responsible, or we're not, if we can't take care of ourselves and our responsibilities, it doesn't do any good to meditate all day,
To finish, I guess the COVID is just a huge fear. Seeing all those people dying in America, the same in the UK. How can you deal with this fear to move forward back into society, make a living and all that? I guess this fear is cut the hatred poison, is that right? Fear is really bad for addicts, isn't it?
How can we are you talking about the fear? Your connection's not that great, John, so I'm trying. So you're talking about the fear of the coronavirus? Is that you're talking about?
Yeah, the fear of that, what that's causing to UK society, American society.
Yeah.
How do they make a living? How can I be skillful about? I mean, fear's, step 10, we can ask God to remove it, but then I don't really believe in God. And bloody hell.
Right.
I've got those steps.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure I have any great wisdom about fear other than, well, I won't say this is wisdom, but that, we have to walk through it, like we have to look at, and we can't let fear stop us. And I mean, certainly a meditation practice can help you with fear because it can help you to be calm, so certainly, to use your meditation to bring calm into the body is a good starting point so that you can be functional, right? Because if you're caught up in anxiety and fear, the mind is so agitated that you can't function effectively, you can't think clearly. So meditation is a really important tool for calming so that we can then move past fear.
Was Buddha like a fearless person? He didn't have any fear in his day-to-day?
Say again? Say that again?
Just to finish, so was Buddha, was he a fearless person? Don't know, we just don't know. Striving for.
It sure seems like it, it certainly seems like it when you see the things that he took on in his life, and how he approached his own path. It seemed like he was not afraid to try anything. And in the mythology of Buddhism, he was attacked by Mara, the tempter, in many different ways. And the power of his loving kindness and his awareness allowed, all those things to kind of dissipate.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. I see we've run over a bit, but.
Thank you for your great questions, John. And Kevin, yeah, I don't know. I think that the way that you've shared, just it brings to mind your commitment and how your intention and how this has to be carried day after day. And it also brings to mind just the gratitude that we can offer ourselves for, being present here, being present in each hour, and being gracious to ourselves for every day that we're committed to the path, to our recovery efforts. Yeah. So yeah, much appreciated. I wanted to recommend a book, and that book is your book. Living Kindness, Buddhist Teachings for a Troubled World. And you can find it on Kevin's website. It seems like it might be appropriate reading for the day.
Thank you. Yes, I hope so. I thought things were bad when I wrote it, but they've gotten worse. I have to say hi to Vince. Hi, Vince. It's great to see you. And Greg and Gary, a few people I haven't seen in a while. And Jennifer Block, hello. Just seeing your name there.
And Gary's going to be offering a teaching next month. He's going to be our teacher next month. So that's Sunday, August 2nd. So yeah, we look forward to seeing you there.
Yeah.
Thanks for everybody who you're here at the end of the program even.
Right.
And I wanted to offer just 3 more links. I think that they're going to come through separate links. The first one is for Donna, if you would like to contribute to the network, to our teachers, and to growing our programs. And the other 2 are ways to stay in touch with the Academy. It's we have a web page on our website, and we also have a Facebook page, and we have a Facebook group, which you just have to apply for, but everybody's accepted. And that's you may find some medium for conversation there around your recovery efforts, questions, and things that are on your mind. So we welcome everybody to check us out.